Chucky had always been a curious kid, often venturing into places others feared to explore. His latest obsession was the basement of his old Victorian house. The dimly lit, cobweb-filled space held an inexplicable allure for him, and he couldn't resist the urge to uncover its secrets. Little did he know that his curiosity would lead him down a dark and terrifying path. It all began one rainy afternoon. Chucky's parents were out of town, leaving him alone in the creaky old house. As he descended the creaking wooden stairs into the basement, he felt an eerie chill run down his spine. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the sound of his own heartbeat. In the dim light, Chucky's eyes scanned the room, taking in the dusty shelves, forgotten tools, and discarded furniture. As he approached a large wooden crate in the corner, he noticed strange scratch marks on its surface. With trembling hands, he pried open the lid, revealing a collection of old photographs and letters. The photographs depicted a family that seemed hauntingly familiar. Chucky recognized the faces, his own parents, but much younger. Confusion washed over him as he realized these photos were taken long before he was born. He picked up a letter dated decades ago and began to read its contents. The letter revealed a dark secret, a tragic event that occurred in the very house Chucky now called home. It detailed a series of mysterious disappearances, starting with a family who had lived there years ago. The letter spoke of strange occurrences in the basement, of voices whispering in the dark, and the feeling of being watched. As Chucky read, the basement seemed to come alive around him. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. Fear mingled with his curiosity, but he couldn't tear himself away from the unfolding story of his haunted home. Chucky's mind raced with questions as he delved further into the letter's chilling account. It described a hidden passage within the basement, leading to a secret chamber where unspeakable acts had taken place. The writer urged anyone who discovered the truth to leave the house immediately, for fear of the evil that lurked within. Driven by a mix of morbid fascination and a desire to confront the darkness head-on, Chucky began searching for the hidden passage. He moved boxes, shifted furniture, and tapped on walls, hoping to find a telltale hollow sound. Finally, after what felt like hours, he discovered a loose brick in the far corner of the basement. With a surge of adrenaline, Chucky pulled the brick aside, revealing a narrow passageway shrouded in darkness. His heart pounding, he stepped into the inky void, guided only by the faint glow of his flashlight. The air grew colder as he ventured deeper, the sound of his footsteps echoing ominously. Suddenly, Chucky stumbled upon a small room filled with decaying furniture and a broken mirror hanging on the wall. He approached the mirror cautiously, but as he looked into it, a distorted reflection stared back at him. Shocked, he recoiled, realizing that it was not his own face in the mirror, but the reflection of a sinister figure. Panic seized Chucky's body, and he turned to flee, but his path was blocked by a figure emerging from the shadows. It was an old man, his face etched with deep lines of age and malice. The man's eyes gleamed with a sinister light as he lunged towards Chucky, his long, bony fingers reaching for his throat. In a desperate struggle for survival, Chucky fought back with all his strength, managing to break free from the old man's grip. He raced through the underground passage, guided only by his instincts and the distant glimmers of daylight. Finally, he burst through a hidden door, emerging into the safety of his own backyard. Gasping for breath, Chucky collapsed on the damp grass, his mind swirling with the horrors he had just witnessed. The old man, the secret chamber, the unsettling truth. Everything felt like a nightmare from which he couldn't awaken. As the sun began to set, Chucky made a decision. He would confront the past, unravel the secrets of his haunted home, and ensure that the evil lurking in the basement would never harm anyone again. With a newfound determination, he resolved to delve deeper into the dark history of the house and uncover the truth once and for all. Days turned into weeks, and Chucky delved into the archives, searching for any records or stories related to his house. He visited local libraries, spoke to longtime residents, and scoured online databases for any trace of the dark history that had haunted his basement. Slowly, he pieced together a chilling narrative. It turned out that the house had once belonged to a notorious serial killer who had preyed on unsuspecting families. The basement had been his den of horrors, where he had committed unspeakable acts of violence and murder. The old man Chucky had encountered was believed to be the killer himself, long thought to have perished. Determined to put an end to the evil that had plagued his home, Chucky sought the help of paranormal investigators and local authorities. They conducted thorough searches of the basement, unearthing hidden rooms and evidence of the heinous crimes committed within those walls. The authorities launched a full investigation, working to bring closure to the families of the victims and ensure justice for the lives lost. Chucky's courage and determination became a crucial factor in solving the cold cases and finally putting an end to the terror that had plagued his basement. The house became a site of interest for thrill seekers and ghost hunters, eager to experience the remnants of its dark past. But Chucky, having confronted the horrors firsthand, decided it was time to move on. The memories of the basement and its sinister secrets were etched deeply in his mind, and he longed for a fresh start. With the support of his parents, Chucky relocated to a new home, far away from the shadows that haunted him. The experience had forever changed him, but he refused to let it define him. Determined to overcome the trauma, he immersed himself in positive pursuits, seeking solace in art and helping others who had experienced similar horrors. Years passed, and Chucky grew into a resilient and compassionate individual. The nightmares of the basement became less frequent, replaced by a sense of empowerment and a desire to make a difference. He became an advocate for victims of crime, using his own story as a source of inspiration and hope. Though the memories of that fateful journey into the basement would never truly fade, Chucky found solace in knowing that he had confronted the darkness and played a role in bringing justice to the victims. His resilience and bravery would forever serve as a testament to the power of confronting one's fears and the triumph of light over darkness. And as the house stood in silent solitude, its basement forever marked by the horrors of the past, Chucky carried the lessons learned deep within his heart, vowing to make every day a testament to the strength of the human spirit. I don't know who you are or what your name is, but listen to me. If you ever hear someone in your backyard breaking down your driveway, whether it's yours or a neighbor's, and yelling in a rough male voice, open the door for me. Know that you have to pack your bags and run. Run to the other side of town, or maybe to another city, even another country, and pray. Pray to whomever you want. Christ, Buddha, Kulu, that it doesn't get you. Better yet, get yourself an animal. A kitty, a dog, a fish, or even a Brazilian tarantula. The main thing is to have some animal in your house. It will be able to warn you of its approach. I myself had an aquarium with a goldfish and a collie named Jackson, but I failed to realize in time what their strange deaths meant. At first, Jackson began to behave strangely. He could not sit still, all the time asked for a walk, and on the street wanted to break free and run away. The fish died as soon as the dog started to go crazy. I didn't see anything sinister in it. Well, the fish died and died. We'll send its corpse to learn the secrets of the city sewer, and that's the end of it. And the dog is probably just in a playful mood, which will pass in a couple of days. But neither in a couple of days nor in a week did Jackson calm down, but only became more noisy. He was constantly whining, especially at night, wanting to run away from the apartment and generally as far away from our yard as possible. On walks, I began to notice that the same thing was happening to some of my neighbors' dogs. And there was another oddity. Despite the summertime, the birds had disappeared from the yard. There were no sparrows chirping, no crows cawing, and none of that idiotic sound that pigeons make. The end of all this animal madness was one interesting procession that took place in my yard. I opened the door to the entryway, And thank goodness I didn't go in right away, because a whole line of rats came running out. There must have been about 100 of them, hundreds of dark brown furry bodies, with nasty ball tails, making nasty squeaking noises. Jackson went crazy for about a week, after which his behavior took a 180-degree turn. Inattentiveness was replaced by apathy, and my doggy spent all day and night on his bed. He had almost stopped eating, and I had already decided to take him to the vet the following weekend, but when I returned home one day after a day of work, I found him dead. The unfortunate Jackson had been living with me for 5 years now, and I was terribly saddened by his passing. I realized it was due to some kind of illness. That's why he was acting so strangely. And I felt guilty about it. All the animals that could left our yard, and those that couldn't chose to die. It might have seemed as if some evil was coming upon us all, and the animal sensed it. But man is the dumbest animal, and none of the people in our yard felt the approaching storm, and it was ready to break. It started on a warm Friday in June. It was about 12 o'clock, and I had just gone to bed before I could fall asleep, when suddenly a wild rumble and a shout came from the street. "Open the door for me." Apparently it was not opened, and the knocking was repeated again. Then came another shout, "I'll open the door for you," followed by a long, coarse mat. 2 rude men had quarreled. So what of it? So I thought, falling asleep and hoping that the shouts of their fight would not disturb my sleep. In the morning, going to the store to buy bread, I saw an ambulance standing in the yard. Thinking that someone was ill, I went on my way. Later, however, I learned that no one was sick, just a dead body found in the driveway. The deceased was John Woodson, a man in his 40s who lived next door. As it turned out, he was the one who was going to open the door the previous night, which is why he left the house. His wife had gone to the cottage as early as Thursday, so there was no one to be concerned that he was taking so long to return. There were no signs of a fight, and John Woodson died of a heart attack. No witnesses were found. Our yard is quite large, and with the lack of proper benches and an undisturbed playground, few people gather in our yard on Friday nights to drink beer. 2 days later at night, I woke up to a rumbling noise and the same cry, "Open the door for me." Yeah, someone forgot their keys again. How mystical is that? I soothed myself, trying to sleep. In the wee hours of the morning, I woke up from my thirst and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Thanks to the open windows and living on the first floor, I could hear almost everything that was going on outside at that time. The noise caught my attention, and opening the curtains a little, I looked outside. There I saw that a police car was parked at the neighbor's entrance, and the officers of the law were interviewing people in bathrobes and house slippers. I quickly realized that it was the residents of the first floor who had run outside from their apartments for some reason. Talking to a neighbor about it the next day, I learned that there had been a break-in on the first floor in the next doorway. During the night, the neighbors were awakened by a terrible rumbling noise, and the whole crowd poured out onto the landing. The door to one of the apartments was broken open. The jamb had long been in need of repair and the door in need of replacement, so this was no great obstacle to the robbers. One brave man decided to go inside, but in terror he ran out of there with a wild scream, and after him all the neighbors ran out of the entrance. Until the police arrived, people were afraid to go into the entrance, and the poor man who dared to go into that apartment sat silently aside. Even the police couldn't get him to talk. They found nothing in that apartment. No blood, no corpses, no owners. They had disappeared somewhere, although all the neighbors claimed that the young family that lived in that apartment had not gone anywhere. Mystical, I thought, and did not take this story with due seriousness, although somewhere inside me there was already a worry. 3 days after that, I was again awakened in the night, this time by a call on the intercom, cursing the light. I went to the receiver. "Yes," I said in a sleepy voice. "I'm sorry to wake you up," began a low male voice. But I lost the key to the intercom, please. I didn't finish listening to him and hung up. I wondered what kind of junkie wanted to get into our entrance to get high or rob someone. But the call immediately repeated, and I had to mute the sound to get a good night's sleep. Just as I was getting back into bed, I suddenly heard a shriek from the street. "Open the door for me." Now this creepy visitor was breaking into my entryway. I immediately compared the facts and realized how this night might end for me if I let him in. And the first wave of fear rolled down my spine in goosebumps. I tried to reassure myself that my front door was too strong to break down, so even if this madman did let someone in, there was nothing he could do to me. The scream was repeated over and over again, accompanied by a loud banging on the entryway door. I didn't understand at first why no one had come out to chase the man away, but then I remembered John Woodson had ventured out and realized that people were holding on to the memory of the incident. For about 10 minutes I lay on my bed with my head covered, wishing this maniac would go away. Suddenly I had the strange and frightening thought that it was not a man who was breaking into the entryway otherwise. How could I explain the strange death of John Woodson and the disappearance of that family? Nor would one man have the strength to break down a door, however flimsy. Suddenly, the thing that was so eager to get in the doorway knocked on my window and spoke to me. It was unimaginably scary, as if some super-intelligent monster had quietly entered your apartment. "Hey you," I heard a man's bass. "I know you're lying there, wrapped in a blanket, hoping I won't get you. Ah, you're wrong. I'll come tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and so on until I get to the entrance. If I don't get in that way, I'll find another way. So let me in. Don't make life difficult for both of us." I tried to cover my ears so I wouldn't hear that voice. There was something unspeakably awful about the fact that he was talking to me. I never slept again that night. For a while the thing was still banging on the doorway, but then it left. In the morning I immediately packed my things and moved in with my parents. I spent 3 quiet nights at their place, and then I heard that monstrous scream again. In the last month I had changed several places of residence. I stayed with friends and relatives, and never stayed anywhere for more than a week. No one could understand this running around in apartments. They told me that it was no big deal if some drunk was pounding on the door demanding to be let in. But I knew what it was all about. Recently, my stalker changed his methodology. He was no longer banging on the door at night, but was more subtle. I started receiving letters, both by regular mail and by email, inviting me to all sorts of events. Yes, of course. Would anyone in their right mind invite me to the opening of a book salon on the site of an abandoned factory or to a car show in a country forest? I quickly realized that Mohammed had decided to wait for the mountain to come to him. Well, so be it. Maybe soon he'll change tactics again, and then I'll have no choice but to go straight into his clutches. I don't know what it is or why it wants me. I think there's some sort of harvesting going on. Apparently, this creature needs certain people that it will stop at nothing to get. Now that you've read my story, I hope you'll know what to do when all the critters disappear from your yard, and you hear a scream in the night to open the door. Wesley had always been drawn to the allure of Erm, the promise of unique and personal travel experiences. He had heard countless stories of people staying in charming, hidden gems, tucked away from the bustling touristy areas. And so, when the opportunity arose for him to spend a few weeks in a quaint cottage nestled deep within the woods, he jumped at the chance. The cottage, a cozy haven surrounded by towering trees, looked like something out of a fairy tale. Its charm was undeniable, and the solitude it offered was exactly what Wesley craved. He arrived with a sense of excitement, ready to escape the mundane routines of his daily life. The first few days were serene. Wesley explored the surroundings, hiking through the dense forest and breathing in the crisp, fresh air. But as the days turned into nights, a subtle unease began to settle in. He would hear rustling outside the cottage, distant footsteps that seemed to come closer each night. Wesley brushed it off as his imagination, convincing himself it was just the sounds of the wilderness. One evening, as he sat by the warm glow of the fireplace, his attention was caught by a small, faded photograph on the mantel. The photo featured a young woman with a radiant smile, standing in front of the very cottage he was staying in. The handwritten note at the bottom read, "Forever in our hearts, Emily." Wesley's curiosity was piqued. He decided to do some research online, hoping to uncover the story behind Emily. What he discovered sent shivers down his spine. Emily had been a vibrant young woman who had mysteriously disappeared from the cottage years ago. The details were scant, but the chilling part was the lack of closure. She had never been found. As darkness fell that night, Wesley's unease grew. He locked all the doors and windows, trying to shake off the creeping sense of dread. He couldn't help but feel like he was being watched, a sensation that seemed to be lurking just beyond the shadows. Days turned into nights, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Wesley's nerves were on edge, his every sense heightened. He could hardly sleep, his imagination running wild with thoughts of Emily's fate and the eerie presence he couldn't escape. One night, a soft tap on the window shattered the silence. Wesley's heart raced as he cautiously approached, peering outside. Moonlight cast an eerie glow, revealing the figure of a woman standing just beyond the glass. Panic surged through him, his mind racing to make sense of the impossible sight. With trembling hands, Wesley hesitated before unlocking the window. The woman's face was pale, her eyes wide and hollow. She looked exactly like the girl in the photograph, Emily. Before he could react, she whispered, "Help me," her voice barely audible. Fear and compassion battled within Wesley. He wanted to help, to unravel the mystery that surrounded Emily's disappearance. He decided to leave the safety of the cottage, guided by the flickering lantern he held tightly in his grasp. The forest seemed to close in around him, shadows dancing and twisting like malevolent spirits. Emily led Wesley deeper into the woods, her presence hauntingly ethereal. The forest became a labyrinth, the trees twisting and contorting into unnatural shapes. Wesley's pulse quickened as the air grew colder, and a foreboding sense of doom settled upon him. Eventually, they arrived at a clearing, and Emily stopped, her gaze fixed on a dilapidated cabin. The atmosphere was suffocating, a palpable aura of malevolence surrounding the decaying structure. Emily's voice trembled as she whispered, "This is where he kept me." The realization hit Wesley like a thunderbolt. The man who had taken Emily captive must have been the same person who haunted his nights, the source of the rustling sounds and footsteps that seemed to encroach upon his sanctuary. As the truth unfolded, a menacing figure emerged from the shadows, a sinister smile etched across his face. Wesley's heart raced, his survival instinct kicking in. He turned to flee, but the forest seemed to shift and twist, disorienting him. The man's chilling laughter echoed through the trees as he closed in. In a desperate bid for escape, Wesley sprinted through the woods, his breath ragged and his heart pounding. But the man was relentless, always just a step behind, his malevolent presence closing in like a tightening noose. Wesley's desperation pushed him to his limits as he navigated the labyrinthine forest. Every gasping breath felt like a knife in his chest, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins gave him the strength to keep going. He could hear the man's heavy breathing and taunting laughter, driving him forward even as his legs threatened to give out. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Wesley stumbled upon a hidden path, bathed in a faint, eerie glow. With renewed determination, he followed the trail, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The path led him to the edge of a cliff, overlooking a churning river far below. Wesley's heart sank as he realized there was nowhere left to run. He turned to face his pursuer, his chest heaving and his mind racing for a plan. The man emerged from the woods, his expression a twisted blend of rage and sadistic glee. "You can't escape, Wesley," the man sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "You're just another pawn in my game." Wesley's resolve hardened. He refused to become another victim, another chapter in the man's sinister tale. With a surge of adrenaline, he lunged at his assailant, catching him off guard. They grappled at the edge of the cliff, teetering dangerously close to the precipice. In a final, desperate struggle, Wesley managed to break free, sending the man tumbling over the edge. The man's screams echoed through the night as he disappeared from sight, swallowed by the relentless river below. Exhausted and battered, Wesley collapsed to the ground, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The forest around him seemed to sigh in relief, the air no longer heavy with malevolence. As dawn broke, its gentle light began to wash away the darkness that had clung to the woods. Wesley eventually made his way back to the cottage, his body and mind weary from the harrowing ordeal. The memories of that fateful night would forever haunt him, a reminder of the darkness that could lurk beneath the surface of even the most idyllic settings. In the days that followed, authorities arrived to investigate the man's disappearance, piecing together the twisted puzzle he had woven. The truth about Emily's fate was finally revealed, bringing a semblance of closure to her tragic story. As Wesley returned to his normal life, the memories of his terrifying encounter lingered. The cottage, once a sanctuary, now held a sense of foreboding. He couldn't help but wonder if he would ever truly escape the shadows that had enveloped him in that remote forest. Sally was a young and adventurous woman who loved to travel and explore new places. She had heard about the mysterious house on the outskirts of a small, remote town that was available for rent on Erm. The locals called it the haunted house due to the dark history it carried. Intrigued by the rumors, Sally saw it as a thrilling opportunity and decided to book it for a week-long vacation. As she arrived at the house, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The property was surrounded by dense woods, and the old mansion seemed to loom over her like a shadow from the past. But Sally brushed off her fears, convincing herself it was all just local superstitions. On the first night, strange things began to happen. As Sally was preparing dinner in the kitchen, she heard faint whispers and footsteps in empty rooms. Chills ran down her spine, but she attributed it to her imagination playing tricks on her. Later that night, while lying in bed, she heard a door creak open and close down the hallway. Feeling increasingly unsettled, Sally decided to do some research the next day. To her horror, she discovered that the house had a dark history dating back a century. The previous owners had lost their young daughter under mysterious circumstances, and subsequent owners had reported eerie occurrences and tragedies, leading to the legend that the house was cursed. Despite the terrifying revelations, Sally couldn't shake her curiosity. She wanted to uncover the truth behind the curse and expose it as mere folklore. With each passing day, the supernatural events intensified. She heard disembodied voices, saw fleeting shadows in the corners of her vision, and witnessed objects moving on their own. Sally's determination led her to a local historian, Mr. Johnson, who had a deep understanding of the town's history. Mr. Johnson warned her to leave the house, explaining that several guests who had tried to disprove the curse met with unfortunate fates. Ignoring his advice, Sally pressed on, hoping to find a logical explanation. As Sally delved deeper into the house's history, she discovered that the curse seemed to target individuals who didn't respect the tragedy that had occurred there. Determined to break the curse, Sally decided to hold a ceremony to honor the memory of the deceased girl and pay her respects. On the night of the ceremony, the atmosphere in the house became oppressive. Sally lit candles and recited heartfelt words, asking for forgiveness and offering solace to the restless spirit. During the ceremony, she felt a sudden drop in temperature, and an eerie silence enveloped the room. Just as she was about to conclude, the candles flickered violently, and a presence seemed to fill the air. Sally was overwhelmed with fear, but she persisted, staying true to her intention of putting the spirit to rest. A chilling voice echoed through the house, thanking Sally for her compassion and revealing the tragic tale of the young girl who had died there. She had been neglected by her family and left to suffer alone, and her spirit had remained trapped within the house ever since, seeking revenge against those who showed no remorse for her fate. Tears streamed down Sally's face as she apologized on behalf of those who had caused the girl's pain. With her heart heavy with emotion, she pleaded for the curse to be lifted and for the spirit to find peace. In that moment, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. The temperature returned to normal, and the oppressive atmosphere dissipated. The spirit seemed to have moved on. The following days, the house felt serene, and the supernatural occurrences ceased. Sally's act of kindness had broken the curse, and the locals began to see her as a hero who had put the troubled spirit to rest. As she prepared to leave the town, Mr. Johnson approached her with gratitude and admiration for her bravery. Sally had not only survived the curse, but she had also brought closure to a haunting chapter of the town's history. Little did she know that the spirit of the young girl had found a way to express her gratitude. In her final night at the house, Sally had a vivid dream where the girl appeared, smiling and at peace, thanking her for setting her soul free. When Sally woke up, she knew that this experience would stay with her forever. From that day onward, Sally continued her adventures, carrying the memory of the haunted house and the tragic girl in her heart. She had learned that beneath the veil of darkness, there could be profound stories of sorrow and forgiveness, waiting to be unraveled by those brave enough to seek the truth. In the weeks that followed, Sally couldn't help but reflect on her harrowing experience at the haunted house. She had gone on many adventures before, but this one was unlike any other. The encounter with the restless spirit had left a lasting impact on her, and she felt a newfound sense of appreciation for the complexities of life and death. As she traveled to new destinations, Sally often found herself seeking out local folklore and haunted legends. She felt a strange connection to the supernatural world, a desire to understand the stories behind the unexplained and mysterious. Through her travels, she became known as the Ghost Seeker, someone who sought out haunted places not for thrill but to uncover the untold stories and bring closure to lost souls. Over the years, Sally compiled her experiences and findings into a book, recounting her encounters with the paranormal and the history behind each haunting. Her book became a bestseller, captivating readers worldwide with its unique blend of adventure, suspense, and compassion. While her fame grew, Sally never lost sight of the true purpose of her journey. She continued to investigate stories of hauntings, always approaching each case with empathy and a genuine desire to help the spirits find peace. One day, as she was researching her next project, she received an email from a young woman named Emily. Emily explained that she had recently moved into an old house and was experiencing unexplainable occurrences, similar to what Sally had faced at the haunted house years ago. Sally could sense the fear and anxiety in Emily's message and immediately felt a strong connection to the situation. She decided to visit Emily in her home to see if she could offer any help. As she entered the house, she sensed a lingering presence and knew that there was a restless spirit seeking attention. Over the next few days, Sally delved into the history of the house and discovered the tragic tale of a woman who had died under mysterious circumstances decades ago. It was evident that the spirit of this woman was still bound to the house, unable to find peace. With her experience and understanding of the supernatural world, Sally devised a plan to help the spirit move on. She held a ceremony to honor the woman's memory and offered words of compassion and forgiveness. The atmosphere in the house shifted, and Sally knew that the spirit had heard her. In the days that followed, Emily noticed a significant change in her home. The unexplainable occurrences ceased, and she felt a sense of tranquility she hadn't experienced since moving in. Emily was eternally grateful to Sally for bringing peace to her home and had seen firsthand the power of compassion and understanding in the face of the unknown. As Sally continued her journey, she encountered many more spirits and heard countless haunting tales. Each encounter deepened her understanding of the afterlife and the importance of acknowledging the past to find resolution. Her life's work became a beacon of hope for those affected by the supernatural and a testament to the power of empathy. Sally knew that there was much more to the world than what met the eye, and she was determined to continue seeking out the stories of lost souls, bringing them the closure they sought and the peace they deserved. Randy, an adventurous traveler, decided to take a break from his mundane life and booked an errand in a remote countryside town. The listing was for a charming old house with a mysterious history, but Randy was intrigued by the idea of staying in such a unique place. Little did he know that this decision would lead him down a path of horror and darkness. As Randy arrived at the house, he was struck by its eerie atmosphere. The facade seemed pleasant enough, but there was something unsettling about it. Ignoring his gut feeling, Randy brushed it off as mere nerves and entered the house. The interior was adorned with antique furniture, and dim lighting added to the spooky ambience. The host, an elderly woman named Mrs. Grimsby, gave Randy a warm welcome, though her eyes held a hint of sadness and secrecy. She handed him the keys, warning him not to venture into the basement and not to stay past midnight. Randy laughed nervously, thinking it was just an old woman's tale. As the evening settled in, Randy explored the rooms, each filled with history and a strange vibe. However, curiosity got the best of him, and he couldn't resist the allure of the forbidden basement. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, dusty staircase leading downward. Randy descended, and the air grew colder with each step. As he reached the bottom, he noticed old, rusted chains attached to the walls, giving him an ominous feeling. Unbeknownst to him, the basement held a chilling history of torment and cruelty. Unable to resist his curiosity, Randy continued his descent into the darkened basement. His heart pounded in his chest, but he pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets hidden beneath the old house. As he explored the basement, Randy stumbled upon a hidden chamber, obscured by a tattered curtain. Inside, he found faded photographs and journal entries scattered across a dusty table. The images depicted innocent children who seemed to be trapped in this sinister place, with despair and fear etched into their faces. Frightened but determined to learn the truth, Randy started reading the journal. It belonged to Mrs. Grimsby's late husband, Horace Grimsby, who had once been the owner of the house. The entry spoke of a dark and cruel past where Horace, driven by madness, had used the basement to torture and abuse orphaned children, whom he had lured to the house with promises of a loving home. As Randy read further, he realized that the spirits of those tortured children still lingered in the house, seeking revenge for the horrors they endured. The spirits were trapped, unable to move on until justice was served. Haunted by the chilling revelations, Randy decided to confront Mrs. Grimsby. He discovered her in the living room, whispering to herself and appearing to be in a trance. He gently questioned her about the past, and she confessed the terrible truth. Mrs. Grimsby had been complicit in her husband's sinister acts, and her guilt weighed heavily on her conscience. She had been trying to protect the world from the malevolent spirits by warning people not to enter the basement or stay past midnight. She revealed that she had wanted to tear down the house, but was unable to do so due to the curse placed upon it by vengeful spirits. As the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere in the house changed. Doors slammed shut, and chilling cries echoed through the halls. The tortured spirits of the children were growing stronger, fueled by the presence of a new intruder, Randy. Realizing that he was the key to ending the curse, Randy resolved to free the spirits from their torment. He vowed to help the children find peace and ensure that justice was served for the atrocities they had suffered. As Randy delved deeper into the history of the house, he uncovered evidence that could expose the Grimsby family's dark past and bring them to justice. He planned to seek help from the local authorities, but he knew he needed to act quickly before the malevolent spirits could harm anyone else. Randy spent the restless night researching and compiling evidence of the Grimsby family's atrocities, hoping that it would be enough to bring them to justice. As the sun rose, he felt a sense of urgency to confront Mrs. Grimsby before the spirits grew even more powerful. When he confronted her with the evidence, Mrs. Grimsby broke down, confessing her dark past and the role she played in her husband's heinous acts. She expressed remorse and regret, stating that she had been haunted by the children's spirits ever since, trapped in a never-ending cycle of guilt and despair. Randy empathized with Mrs. Grimsby's torment, understanding that she was also a victim of her husband's cruelty. Together, they devised a plan to try and break the curse that bound the tortured spirits to the house. Randy contacted the local authorities and shared the evidence he had uncovered, urging them to conduct a thorough investigation into the Grimsby family's past. With the truth exposed, the townspeople were horrified by the house's history and offered their support in any way they could. While waiting for the authorities to arrive, Randy decided to reach out to the restless spirits himself. He sought to understand their pain, hoping to help them find the peace they so desperately sought. With Mrs. Grimsby by his side, they held a séance in the basement, a somber attempt to communicate with the trapped souls. As the séance progressed, the atmosphere grew tense, and the spirits made themselves known. Cries and moans filled the air, and Randy sensed the profound sorrow they carried. He spoke to them, promising that he would help them find justice and release from their torment. At that moment, the authorities arrived, ready to investigate the Grimsby house. They discovered the hidden chamber in the basement, the photographs, and the journal, confirming Randy's claims. The town rallied behind Randy and Mrs. Grimsby, vowing to help the tormented spirits find peace. Together, they performed a ritual of cleansing and forgiveness, seeking to break the curse that held the spirits captive. As they completed the ritual, a profound sense of calm washed over the house. The malevolent presence vanished, and the tortured cries were replaced by a serene silence. The spirits had finally found the peace they had been denied for so long. In the aftermath, the authorities arrested the remaining Grimsby family members who had been involved in the terrible acts. The town decided to demolish the cursed house, hoping to put an end to its dark legacy once and for all. Randy and Mrs. Grimsby, both deeply changed by the experience, decided to create a memorial for the children who had suffered under the Grimsby's reign of terror. They wanted to honor their memory and ensure that such atrocities would never happen again. Over time, the town healed from the horrors of the past, and the memory of the cursed house began to fade. Randy, forever changed by his encounter with the supernatural, continued his travels, spreading the message of hope and justice to all he met. And so, the story of the cursed Airbnb house and its dark past became a cautionary tale, reminding people of the importance of facing the truth, seeking justice, and finding redemption in even the darkest of circumstances. Ryan sat on the edge of the worn-out couch, staring anxiously at the clock on the wall. The tick-tock sound echoed through the empty house, reminding him of his solitude. It was the first time he had ever been left home alone for an entire weekend. His parents had gone on a much-needed vacation, leaving him behind to look after the house. As darkness enveloped the neighborhood, Ryan's nerves began to rise. He tried to distract himself by turning on the TV, but the sound of his own footsteps echoed in the silence, amplifying his unease. The house seemed larger than ever before, its empty rooms feeling like gaping voids waiting to swallow him whole. Ryan's attention was drawn to a sudden creaking sound coming from upstairs. His heart raced as he imagined all sorts of terrifying scenarios. What if there was someone else in the house? His mind conjured up images of masked intruders lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce on him. Summoning all his courage, Ryan slowly climbed the staircase, each step creaking beneath his weight. He reached the landing and nervously glanced down the dimly lit hallway. The closed bedroom doors seemed to taunt him, promising secrets and horrors within. Taking a deep breath, Ryan pushed open his parents' bedroom door. The room was bathed in darkness, except for a sliver of moonlight that peeked through the gap in the curtains. He cautiously stepped inside and flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. The power was out. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest as he moved towards the closet. He slowly turned the doorknob, half expecting a monster to jump out at him. But all he found were his parents' neatly hung clothes and a few forgotten boxes. Feeling a mix of relief and disappointment, Ryan closed the closet door and decided to check the rest of the rooms. He ventured into his own bedroom next, scanning every corner for any signs of an intruder. The room appeared undisturbed, but a chill ran down his spine as he noticed something odd. His laptop, which he had left closed on the desk before he went downstairs, was now open. Ryan's breath caught in his throat as he approached the desk. On the screen was a single sentence typed in bold letters. "I'm watching you." Fear gripped Ryan's entire being. He felt like a trapped animal, hunted by an unknown predator. His mind raced with questions. Who could have accessed his laptop? How did they get into the house? Was this some sick joke? He closed the laptop and hurriedly made his way downstairs. Ryan's hands trembled as he fumbled for his phone in his pocket. He dialed his best friend, Emma, hoping that she could offer some reassurance or advice. As the phone rang, Ryan's eyes were drawn to the front door. It was slightly ajar. He was certain he had closed and locked it before. Panic surged through his veins, and he slammed the door shut, turning the key with a shaking hand. "Hello?" Emma's voice came through the phone. "Emma, something's wrong. I think someone's in the house," Ryan blurted out, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma's voice was filled with concern. "Ryan, are you sure? Maybe it's just your imagination playing tricks on you." "No, Emma, I'm serious. I found my laptop open, and there was a message on the screen. And now the front door was open." "I don't know what to do," Ryan whispered, his fear palpable. "Okay, Ryan, take a deep breath. I'm coming over right now. Just stay on the line with me. We'll figure this out together," Emma reassured him, her voice steady and calming. Ryan clutched his phone tightly, grateful for Emma's support. He followed her advice and stayed on the line as he cautiously moved through the house, checking every room and corner. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of his own rapid breathing. As Ryan reached the kitchen, his heart skipped a beat. The back door was wide open, swaying gently in the night breeze. He could feel the cold air seeping into the house, chilling him to the bone. It was as if the intruder had deliberately left a trail, taunting him with their presence. "Emma, the back door is open too," Ryan whispered, his voice quivering. "Ryan, get out of the house now." Emma's voice rose with urgency. "Go to a neighbor's house and call the police." "I'm on my way." Ryan hesitated for a moment, torn between his fear of leaving the perceived safety of his home and the growing realization that he might not be alone in the house. Finally, he mustered the courage to heed Emma's advice. He quietly slipped out of the kitchen and darted towards the front door. But just as he reached for the doorknob, a chilling voice echoed through the house. "Leaving so soon, Ryan?" Ryan froze, his hands suspended in midair. The voice sent shivers down his spine, its sinister tone confirming his worst fears. He slowly turned around, his eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. And there, at the end of the corridor, stood a shadowy figure, partially concealed by the darkness. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" Ryan's voice trembled with a mix of fear and defiance. The figure took a step forward, revealing a wicked smile that sent a shiver down Ryan's spine. "I want to play a little game, Ryan. A game of cat and mouse. But remember, I always catch my prey." Ryan's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the danger he was in. With trembling hands, he unlocked the front door and flung it open, desperate to escape. He sprinted out into the night, his eyes darting from house to house, searching for any signs of life. As he ran towards the nearest neighbor's house, Ryan glanced back one last time. The shadowy figure stood in the doorway, watching him with cold, calculating eyes. It sent a chill down his spine, but he knew he had to keep running, keep fighting for his life. Ryan pounded on the neighbor's front door, his breath ragged and his heart racing. A kind-faced elderly couple opened the door, their expressions filled with concern at the sight of the panicked teenager before them. "What happened, young man?" the man asked, his voice filled with empathy. "There's someone in my house. They were watching me," Ryan managed to say between gasps for air. "Please, call the police." The couple quickly ushered Ryan inside and dialed emergency services. Ryan sat on their couch, trembling and praying for help to arrive soon. His mind raced with thoughts of what the intruder might do next. Were his parents safe? What was the motive behind this terrifying game? Within minutes, the sound of sirens grew closer, and the flashing lights illuminated the night. The police arrived, their presence bringing a sense of relief to Ryan's frayed nerves. They took his statement and assured him that they would thoroughly investigate the situation. As the police conducted their search, Ryan's parents were contacted and rushed back home. Fear and worry etched on their faces as they embraced their son, grateful that he was unharmed. Over the next few days, the police meticulously combed through the house, collecting evidence and interviewing neighbors. The intruder, however, seemed to have vanished without a trace, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease. Ryan and his family decided to install a state-of-the-art security system and take extra precautions to ensure their safety. But even with these measures in place, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The haunting memory of that menacing smile burned into his mind. Months passed, and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Ryan's fear began to fade, replaced by a determination to move forward. He focused on his studies and spent more time with Emma and his other friends, seeking solace and distraction from the traumatic experience. One evening, as Ryan was walking home from school, he noticed a figure standing near a street lamp. It was the same shadowy figure from that fateful night. Panic surged through him, but as he drew closer, he realized that it was just a statue, cast by the street lamp's glow. Ryan took a deep breath, his heartbeat gradually returning to a steady rhythm. The figure was nothing more than a reminder of the past, a symbol of the strength he had gained from facing his fears. He knew he couldn't let the memory of that night hold him back. With newfound resilience, Ryan continued his journey home, the weight of the past slowly lifting from his shoulders. The house that had once felt like a cavern of darkness now held the promise of safety and comfort. And as he stepped through the front door, Ryan made a silent vow to create new memories, leaving the shadows of the past behind. Kelly sat alone in her cozy living room, waiting for her parents to return home. It was a stormy night, and the rain poured heavily against the window panes. The wind howled outside, creating an eerie atmosphere. Despite the storm, Kelly's parents had gone out to attend an emergency family event, leaving her alone for the night. They assured her it would be okay, but as the minutes ticked by, Kelly couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Distracting herself, Kelly decided to watch a movie. She turned on the TV and settled into the couch, but she couldn't focus on the film. The sound of the rain seemed to amplify the silence in the house, making her more anxious. Just as she was about to change her mind and call a neighbor for company, the doorbell rang. Startled, Kelly paused the movie and cautiously approached the front door. Through the peephole, she saw a tall man in a dark coat, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Her heart raced, and she hesitated to open the door. The man kept ringing the bell insistently, making her fear grow. Afraid of what might happen if she didn't answer, Kelly finally mustered the courage to open the door, but to her surprise, there was no one there. The rain lashed against her face as she scanned the empty street, searching for any signs of the mysterious visitor. Convinced it was just her imagination playing tricks, she closed the door and returned to the living room. As Kelly resumed her movie, she couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, made her jump. She convinced herself that it was all in her head and tried to focus on the film, but deep down, a gnawing fear remained. Just then, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Kelly's heart skipped a beat as she fumbled for her phone, using its flashlight to navigate through the pitch-black room. The storm outside intensified, and thunder roared, adding to her fear. She longed for her parents' return, praying they would be home soon. As she made her way to the kitchen to find some candles, a strange noise echoed from upstairs. It sounded like a door opening and closing. Goosebumps formed on Kelly's arms as she stood frozen in the hallway. She debated whether to investigate or hide, but her instincts pushed her forward. She climbed the stairs, her footsteps muted by the storm outside. With each step, her unease grew, and her mind raced with terrifying possibilities. She reached the top of the stairs and hesitated outside her bedroom door, trying to steady her trembling hand. Taking a deep breath, she slowly pushed the door open. To her horror, Kelly discovered that her room was in complete disarray. Drawers were pulled out, clothes scattered across the floor, and her cherished toys strewn about. It was as if a tornado had swept through her room. Panic surged through her veins as she realized that something terrible had happened. Kelly's mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos that lay before her. She rushed to her parents' room, hoping for some clue or sign of what had transpired. But as she pushed open their door, she found their room in a similar state of disarray. The once tidy and comforting space was now a scene of disorder and fear. Fear and desperation consumed Kelly as she realized that her parents were not here, and something sinister had occurred in her absence. Thoughts of the mysterious man at the door resurfaced, and she couldn't help but wonder if there was a connection. Her heart pounded in her chest, urging her to act. With trembling hands, Kelly dialed the emergency number, her voice quivering, as she reported her parents' disappearance and the strange events that had unfolded. The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way, but in the depths of her soul, Kelly knew that time was of the essence. As she waited for the authorities to arrive, Kelly's mind raced through memories, trying to recall any details that might help unravel the mystery. She thought about the people her parents had been associating with, any recent conflicts or unusual occurrences, but nothing concrete came to mind. The fear and uncertainty weighed heavily upon her. The sound of sirens finally broke through the storm's symphony, bringing a glimmer of hope to Kelly's heart. She rushed downstairs to meet the police officers, relief washing over her as she saw their familiar uniforms. She shared everything she could remember, emphasizing the strange visitor and the disarray in her room. The officers scoured the house for any evidence, meticulously collecting fingerprints and inspecting every inch of the crime scene. They assured Kelly that they would do everything in their power to find her parents and bring them home safely. However, as the hours turned into days, with no leads or significant breakthroughs, Kelly's hope began to dwindle. The ordeal was far from over, though. The investigation that had begun with her parents' disappearance now expanded to include the entire criminal network they had unwittingly uncovered. The evidence Kelly had gathered, along with the testimonies of others she had contacted, became critical in dismantling the organization piece by piece. Months passed as the truth gradually came to light. Corrupt politicians, influential businessmen, and dangerous criminals were exposed, their web of deceit and criminal activities unraveled. The fight for justice became Kelly's mission, her resilience and determination inspiring others to come forward and share their own stories of suffering at the hands of the organization. Eventually, Kelly's parents were found, bound, and hidden in a remote location. Although they were physically weakened, the fire in their eyes remained unextinguished. Reunited with their daughter, they embraced her tightly, grateful for her unwavering determination and refusal to give up on them. The story of Kelly's ordeal spread far and wide, capturing the attention of media outlets and inspiring countless individuals. She became a symbol of resilience and the fight against corruption. Awards and accolades followed, but for Kelly, the true victory lay in knowing that her efforts had brought justice to those who had wronged her family. With the organization dismantled and its key members behind bars, Kelly and her parents focused on rebuilding their lives. The scars of their past remained, but they were determined to move forward together, cherishing every moment they had as a family. Years later, Kelly became an advocate for victims of crime, using her own experience to bring awareness and support to those who had suffered in silence. Her bravery and unwavering spirit became an inspiration to others. proving that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, there is always hope for a brighter future. And so, the story of Kelly, the courageous girl who refused to be silenced, became a legend, a testament to the power of determination, love, and the unwavering spirit of those who dare to fight against injustice. Carlos had always been drawn to the dark and mysterious. He had an insatiable curiosity for the hidden secrets that lurked beneath the surface of everyday life. So when he stumbled upon an old, decrepit house, he couldn't resist exploring its forgotten corners. While rummaging through a dusty attic, Carlos made a startling discovery, a journal hidden amidst the clutter. As he flicked through its pages, a chill ran down his spine. The journal belonged to a notorious serial killer, detailing his twisted desires, his methods, and his intended victims. Filled with a sense of urgency and responsibility, Carlos immediately sought out the latest entry. To his horror, he discovered that the killer had set his sights on a young woman named Emily. Determined to prevent a tragedy, Carlos embarked on a mission to find and warn her. Carlos tracked down Emily's address and anxiously approached her house, clutching the journal in his trembling hands. He knocked on the door, heart pounding, and when Emily answered, he struggled to find the right words to convey the impending danger. "I found this journal. It belonged to a serial killer," Carlos stammered, his voice laced with urgency. "Emily, you're in danger. You need to listen to me." Emily regarded him skeptically, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Are you serious? This is some sick joke, right?" She scoffed, her tone tinged with disbelief. "No, I swear, it's the truth. He's planning to. He's going to hurt you," Carlos pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. But Emily remained unconvinced, brushing off Carlos's warning as a delusional fantasy. She closed the door in his face, leaving Carlos standing there, consumed by a sense of dread and helplessness. Refusing to give up, Carlos lingered nearby, keeping a watchful eye on Emily's house. He hoped that somehow, against all odds, she would realize the imminent danger she was in and take action. But the hours turned into days, and Emily's routine continued uninterrupted. One evening, as dusk settled over the neighborhood, Carlos noticed a flickering light coming from Emily's window. Concerned, he approached the house and peered through the curtains. What he saw made his blood run cold. Emily was tied to a chair, her eyes wide with terror, as the serial killer from the journal loomed over her. His deranged smile sent shivers down Carlos's spine. It was too late. His worst fears had become a horrifying reality. Guilt and sorrow washed over Carlos as he realized that his efforts to save Emily had failed. He had been the bearer of a warning, but his words had fallen on deaf ears. The weight of his responsibility and the brutal truth of his powerlessness crushed him. As Carlos stood there, paralyzed by grief and remorse, the house grew silent, its secrets forever locked away within its walls. The journal, a haunting testament to the darkness that had consumed its owner, slipped from his trembling hands, its pages fluttering in the wind. In the aftermath of the tragic events that unfolded, Carlos found himself plagued by guilt and remorse. The weight of Emily's fate hung heavily on his shoulders, a constant reminder of his failed attempt to intervene and save her from the clutches of the deranged serial killer. Haunted by the memories and tormented by what he could have done differently, Carlos vowed to find justice for Emily and ensure that the serial killer would be held accountable for his heinous crimes. With renewed determination, Carlos embarked on a quest to uncover the identity of the serial killer and bring him to justice. He immersed himself in the dark underbelly of the city, scouring police records, speaking to informants, and following any lead that could potentially unravel the twisted web of the killer's activities. As Carlos delved deeper into the investigation, he discovered a series of similar unsolved cases, each victim bearing the chilling signature of the serial killer. The puzzle pieces started to fall into place, painting a terrifying picture of a methodical and elusive predator who had eluded capture for far too long. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, as Carlos tirelessly pursued the truth. He endured sleepless nights, haunted by the images of the victims and the knowledge that he had been the only one who could have potentially prevented their tragic fates. Finally, a breakthrough came. Carlos stumbled upon a hidden network of individuals who reveled in the macabre world of serial killers. Through a series of clandestine meetings and exchanges of information, he obtained the name and location of the man responsible for Emily's demise. Filled with a mix of determination and trepidation, Carlos set his plan into motion. He meticulously gathered evidence, collaborating with the police to ensure a swift and decisive apprehension. The day of reckoning had arrived. As the authorities closed in on the serial killer's lair, Carlos found himself torn between a desire for justice and a fear that he may once again be too late. The memories of Emily's terrified eyes and the weight of his guilt threatened to overwhelm him. The confrontation with the serial killer was fierce and chaotic. Carlos stood face to face with the embodiment of evil, fueled by a burning desire to ensure that no more lives would be lost at the hands of this monster. In a climactic struggle, the killer was finally subdued, and justice prevailed. The ordeal had taken its toll on Carlos, but he had fulfilled his promise to Emily and the other victims. Though the scars of the past would never truly fade, he found solace in knowing that he had made a difference, sparing others from experiencing the same fate. In the aftermath, Carlos dedicated himself to supporting the families of the victims and advocating for their healing and justice. He became a beacon of hope, using his own pain and remorse as a driving force to prevent further tragedies and bring closure to those affected by the serial killer's reign of terror. As the years passed, the memory of Emily and the other victims remained etched in Carlos's heart. He carried their stories with him, a constant reminder of the darkness that could befall even the most unsuspecting individuals. But he also carried a sense of purpose, a determination to bring light to the darkest corners and protect others from falling victim to the same horrors. I don't know how long it had been since I'd moved into this room in a bedroom community before I noticed that the 3 windows in the house across the street were constantly on fire. I must have noticed it sometime during my 3rd month, during my study night vigils. In the middle of the night, I'd go to the window to relieve my eyes of monitor fatigue. And sure enough, my gaze was fixed on those damn windows. 3 windows in a row, with the light always on, no matter how deep the night was. I still don't know what the building was. It was quite low, 4 stories, and slightly resembled a school building. I walked around it one afternoon and didn't see any identifying signs, and the heavy metal doors, covered with a layer of rust, looked as if they had not been touched for a long time. Of course, they were locked. Other than those 3 windows on the 4th floor, nothing in the building showed any signs of life. I tried to look through the windows on the 1st floor, but I couldn't see anything. The panes were cloudy, and there seemed to be curtains behind them. One thing I can say for sure, the closer I got to them, the more uncomfortable I became. In the 4th month, I saw a silhouette. I stood at the window in the night and looked out at the empty night street. There was absolute silence. Gradually, my gaze spontaneously focused on the windows. For a moment, something in the room distracted my attention, and when I looked at the windows again, I saw a silhouette. He was standing in the left window, absolutely motionless, and could be seen extremely clearly. He and the window were clearly not separated even by a curtain. But most importantly, even though my windows were higher up, I lived on the 6th floor, and the lights were off. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that he was seeing me, looking at me, right into my eyes. I saw him all the time now. Every night. It was like he was attracted to me. I could stand in a dark room for half an hour in the middle of the night and just stare at him. Maybe it was that interest that almost got me killed. One day I stood like that and stared. Without taking my eyes off the dark silhouette, I raised my hand and touched the glass. What happened in the next instant made me shudder with horror, because he did the same thing. Without a second's hesitation, I drew the curtains and collapsed onto the bed, covering myself like a cowardly child. The darkness and complete silence pressed down on me, and I couldn't stand it any longer, so I got up and turned on the light. All that night, I didn't sleep, but that was only the beginning of the nightmare. The next day I thought about it, convincing myself that nothing terrible had happened. What after all, even if he did see me? It was impossible to see me in the dark room, of course, but the outline of a hand leaning against the glass, he might well have seen me, couldn't he? I convinced myself, eager to change my mind. I made a big mistake that night. I went to the window again. He was standing there. Of course. I looked at him, gingerly touched the glass again. He was motionless. Having experienced some relief, I turned away from the window, and what I saw the next moment made me swoon with horror. At first glance, I saw nothing unusual. The wall was just a reflection of the window and my outline in it. But the thing was that my silhouette in the window absolutely repeated its silhouette. I instantly recognized those outlines because I had looked at him so much that they were forever etched in my memory. My heart raced. It felt like it was going to tear my chest open. I turned to the window again and stared at the silhouette in horror. He raised his hand slowly and pulled it slowly, infinitely slowly, it seemed to me, to the edge of the window. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement on the wall and turned around, though I didn't turn around to realize what was happening. The dark reflection on the wall, my damn reflection, was pulling my arm just as slowly, making an absolutely identical movement. That was the final straw. I woke up in the morning on the floor, under the window. I vaguely remembered the vision that had come to me while I'd been unconscious, as if that silhouette were standing right outside my window, with only a thin line of glass separating us. Though, remembering the events of that night, I couldn't be sure it was only a vision. I didn't wait for the next night. I didn't have much stuff, and a day was enough to move in with an acquaintance who lived on the other side of town. I put the apartment up for sale, not even caring much about the price. I just wanted to get rid of it as soon as possible. Not surprisingly, I found a buyer relatively quickly. It's been 2 years. I've only been down that street a handful of times in that time. I consciously avoided it, but even when necessity brought me there, I could not even think of looking at that building, at those windows. One day I was walking down the street, immersed in my thoughts. It was fall. The asphalt was wet with rain. An elderly man was walking towards me, in whom I recognized my former neighbor from that very apartment at once, despite the years that had passed and the fact that he had almost completely bald during that time. I pretended not to notice him, for I didn't want any reminders of the time when everything had happened. And I wasn't surprised that the chatty old man recognized me and called out to me. We talked for about 5 minutes, but what I learned from him was enough for several sleepless nights. A young man in his 30s, to whom I had sold an apartment at the time, was found dead. No external injuries, just a broken heart. The body was discovered in the morning, and I still shudder at 2 intrusive thoughts. I'm responsible for his death. It could have been me, or could I still be? I'm afraid.